solve large, intractable problems.
It's a new venture altogether.
Your brain is a wild horse there.
Because remember, writing is not a team sport.
You are not selling horse carriages when there are cars.
I want to be known only as the trusted advisor.
More like a tourist.
Play to Potential podcast.
To be a good storyteller, you have to be a good listener to start with. You have to understand what works as a story, right?
In that context.
Yeah, in that context. And then figure out how you can weave a story into your narrative, right? And if you look at it in the book, Sponge, what I've actually done is taken 25 stories of various clients whom I met, written them as stories, and then kind of segued that story into a managerial principle, a leadership concept, etc. So if I just started by saying leaders have to be humble, and then talked about Ardiaga, it wouldn't have worked. Whereas I flip it around. So here's a client from Pune who was going through a chain. He called us. We went and met him. And then this happened, that happened, and then this, and then that's an example of a leader who had humility. So today a lot of clients have these storytelling, invite specialists to do storytelling workshops. Now, I think storytelling is not something you can parachute into a team. I don't think that will work. I think you have to build a culture of sitting and telling stories.
Welcome to the 35th conversation at the Play to Potential podcast, a series of reflective conversations with leaders across disciplines on topics around leadership, transitions, and careers. I'm Deepak Jayaraman, your host and curator of the podcast. I'm an executive coach and work with leaders during high-stakes transitions, whether it's a role transition, leadership transition in a company, or a career transition in an individual's life. To know more about the advisory work I do, you could visit transitioninsight.com. I believe that just like businesses need to be coherent about their answers to the two questions, where to play and how to win, we all need to be thoughtful about our responses to the two questions, where to go and how to grow. This podcast is an attempt at exploring how some leaders across domains have grappled with these two questions as they've gone on their respective journeys. At the outset, I'd like to share a recent development. Play to Potential podcast won the award for the best podcast for 2018 in the recently concluded Digipub Awards, a platform that recognizes digital publishers. My guest this time is Ambi Parameswaran, who's recently launched his book Sponge, which is about leadership lessons he's learned from his clients over his career in the world of advertising. I read the book and it has some really insightful wisdom from his experiences with leaders such as Ratan Tata, Azim Premji, Mr. Damodaran, Dr. Varghese Kurien, Rohinton, and more. In this conversation, we go deeper on some of the elements from the book and talk about how some leaders make tough decisions, how they leverage the wisdom from experts while empowering them, how they keep the connect with the end consumer despite large organizations, and more. We also talked to Ambi about his thoughts on building a personal brand and the art of storytelling, given his rich experiences. A quick thought on how you can consume the podcast. If you want to listen offline during a car ride, plane travel, gym session, or your morning walk, you might want to use one of the popular podcast apps out there. Google and Apple have their podcast players, Spotify, Saavn, Stitcher, and there are many options here. If you're keen to get insights by themes across speakers, I would urge you to visit the curated playlist section of the website, playtopotential.com. And if you want to be informed when I upload new content, you could sign up on the website. You have my word that you will receive less than 2 emails a month and your data will not be shared with any external organization. Without further ado, over to my conversation with Ambi Parameswaran. Ambi, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you trekking down to our office here.
Thank you, Deepak, for inviting me on your show. So happy to be here.
Thank you, and congratulations on the book Sponge. We'll talk about it in a few minutes, but I thought I should talk to Ambi the ad man first before Ambi the author. Maybe a good place to start, Ambi, is I'm curious about how people should make directional choices, career choices. Having spent 25 plus years in an ad agency context, with the wisdom of all these years, if you had to really advise people who are at that inflection point, should I join, let's say, an industry and join the FMCG department versus join an ad agency? What questions should people ask themselves for them to say maybe this is a career that could be fulfilling for them?
Deepak, as you know, there's no one fixed answer for this. Whether you should work in an agency or you should work in the client side of the business. So let me just trace my own, career journey going back to 1977 when even before that, after I finished my IIT, or when I was finishing my IIT, I realized that, BTech or working in engineering may not give me the jollies, and I got involved in a few organizing stuff on campus, and realized maybe there is some fun in that, and went to IIM and actually enjoyed. People who knew me in IIT could not believe that I was topping my class in IIM Calcutta, and they didn't expect me to be anywhere near the top 10% of the class or top 25% of the class, because I was not a very academic guy in IIT. But then IIM Calcutta I actually enjoyed. I enjoyed all the courses. I enjoyed finance. I enjoyed HR. I enjoyed marketing. So it was actually serendipity which kind of got me into advertising in the first pass. I didn't know anything about advertising in my first year. I wanted a summer assignment in Kolkata or Calcutta of those days, because I wanted to spend time in the city, move around the city, enjoy the city, which I had not done. Because like IIM Calcutta is really in the boonies. It's in Joka, way out of the city. So I wanted 2-3 months to spend in the city, to soak up the city. So I was looking for an assignment, and I got a summer assignment with a very young advertising agency called Rediffusion. When I got to know those people, I discovered they were all IIM graduates who had come together to set up the institute, set up the company, and I really enjoyed working with them for 3 months. I did my summer assignment on, at that time, a very esoteric project called Simulation Model for Media Planning. Okay. We didn't have computers at our disposal, so it was largely written out as a project with a flow chart and all that. Sure. So I enjoyed the thing, and then next year when the placement season was rolling by, I got a call from them saying, those were the days when PPO, this whole concept of pre-placement offer, was still not in vogue. Mm-hmm. So I got a call and I said, what do you plan to do? I said, look, I'm applying, and I've got a Hindustan Lever interview tomorrow. So they said, look, Subhash Chakravarti was a branch director of Kolkata. I said, look, let's meet for a drink. So I went and met him for a drink on that particular historic, so to speak, Sunday evening. And at the end, he said, okay, so will you join us? I said, yeah, are you making an offer? He said, yes, we're done. I'm joining you. So he said, okay, we shook hands and I left. And the next day, my placement secretary caught me and said, I hope you're appearing for the 2:00 interview with Hindustan Lever. I said, no. He said, why? I'm going to advertising. He said, are you crazy? He said, no, yaar, I think it's interesting. I want to do something interesting. Not just sell soap. I mean, it's another story. I ended up selling a lot of soap as an advertising career guy.
Part of the value chain anyway.
Yeah, but I actually ended up selling a lot of soap as a part of my advertising career. But I said, I don't want to sell soap. I want to do other things. So he said, look, you can't just walk out of an interview. You've been shortlisted. You have to appear for the interview. So I said, what do I do? So, then these guys have to give you an offer. So what's an offer? So they had to give a letter. So I called those guys up. Look, you have to send a letter. The letter has to reach the placement office by 12:00. If it doesn't reach, I will appear for the interview. So don't blame me. So they said, no. We'll make sure. They sent someone with a letter. I think the telephone lines in Calcutta were not too good. I think they tried faxing it or whatever, and they sent the letter, and I didn't. So theoretically, in my batch, I was the first guy to be placed because I didn't appear for any interview. Got into advertising, really enjoyed 3 years in advertising. Then someone said, look, maybe this is not it. There is another big world out there. So I jumped from advertising into marketing. I went to...
On the client side?
Yeah, onto the client side. As a product manager at Boots, handling Colder and Strepsils, Bernal, and some fairly large...
so those are OTC brands?
Yeah, OTC, plus I also handle some ethical brands.
RX, okay.
Brufen and Kinetone. Enjoyed it. Then as it happened, the boss there moved to a sales, kind of an oriented company called Yellow Pages, which is a pioneering thing. So he made an offer. I went and I worked there for 2 years, setting up the sales system for selling Yellow Pages in this country. It was really, really enjoyable, learned a hell of a lot, but the company had its own issues. At that other time, I said I should go back to advertising because I was missing it. Missing the fun of, working on different problems, every other day, interacting with different sets of clients. And then I got into Ulka. And then Ulka, we made it, FCB Ulka, and then continued there for 27 years. But of my 40-year career, almost 10 years was spent not in advertising. Was spent in sales and marketing. So you have to pick the right things. When I joined Ulka, I remember the head of Lintas at that time, Alec Padamsi, said, "You're making a big mistake. This agency will shut down." I said, "Okay, if it shuts down, then I'll come to you for a job." So he said, "Yeah, okay, good answer. But you should join us now." I said, "No."
And how did you pick Ulka out of the other options?
My former boss joined Ulka. Okay. And I wanted to go to Chennai to work in Chennai for 5 years or whatever. So he said, "Okay, place yourself wherever, look after whatever, you come." So I went. The company was actually, I don't know how he hired me because the company was not making too much money, making a loss. But he was assembling a team of like-minded people. And then the thing worked. So I think whichever job you're in, whether in advertising, marketing, I think the first probably 10 years is when you need to figure out what gets you going. And then by the time you're probably 35, you should hit the highway.
You commit to a direction.
Yeah. And then stay on that for the next 15, 20 years. And then decide whether you want to work till 60 like I did, or want to get off at 55, or you want to work till 70. That's up to you.
That's an interesting paradigm. And I think what's also interesting is you tasted life on both sides of the fence. And then you took a call on, is life on this side better, just to make it binary. But that's interesting as well.
Both sides have its own positives and negatives. And I enjoyed one side, shall we say, a little more than the other side.
Sure.
But I still have a lot of respect for brand teams. And, I think they do a great job. So
that's a great segue for the book, Ambi. Maybe a good place to start is, this is your 5th book? 6th book?
No, it's a 9th book.
9th book, sorry. Apologies. And what's the why behind the book?
Why this book or why book?
Why this? Both actually are
okay. So let me
question.
answer why books.
Yeah.
Why should you write books? I mean,
it's a good place to start.
Who the hell reads books these days? Okay, so that's a good question to start with.
All listens to podcasts, I wonder, right?
Yeah. Who listens to podcasts? Okay, so I started teaching on weekends at one of the business schools in Bombay in 95 or 96. And when I started teaching, I wanted to use, those were days when Harvard cases were not available. And you had to get those Xeroxed cases, and it was not really legal to do all that. So I said, why don't I write some cases myself? So I started writing.
For IMC or?
No, for the institute I was teaching in, right, in Bombay, So I wrote a set of cases. I started using them in the class. It turned out to be quite okay. And I put 15 of them together, sent it to a publisher, Tata McGraw-Hill. They said, we'd love to publish it. So they published it as a book. It came out in the year 1999 or 2000. Called FCB Ulka Brand Building Advertising, Cases and Concepts. And That's almost like a promotion piece for the agency, because all good cases, how the campaign worked and all that, which was fine. I had to use the cases for things, and it turned out the book sold, and they came out with a color version. The first version had CD with all the ads in it, and
Interesting.
so it did well. And then I came out with the second book, which was on consumer research, very simple book on consumer research. And then the third book was on, again, another set of case studies. So the first 6 books really were academic in nature. Case studies, branding concepts, advertising concepts, stuff like that. And then 4.5 years ago, I wrote a book called For God's Sake, which was on advertising and religion. Sorry, marketing and religion, brands and religion, which was based on my PhD, which was on consumer behavior and religiosity. So that did okay, and then came the next one, which was on Nawab's Nudes Noodles, which was looking at changing Indian society through the advertising lens. And this one, the latest, which is Sponge, Leadership Lessons I Learned from My Clients, just came out this month, is really what you can learn from various people whom you meet in your job. So it's a really anecdotal story. So this is a long...
Very interesting. But staying with that, Ambi, why book? In the sense, clearly I understand it started with a little bit of teaching, you had the material, and it also made business sense. But can you pinpoint to some inner driver which leads you to taking time off? It's a lot of time, I'm guessing, each book.
Oh, I mean, each book takes roughly 2 years, but it's really, I write only on the weekends. I don't write during the day. Now I get a little more time, so I write sometimes. I suppose I end up writing because I do a lot of reading, okay, and I do a lot of teaching and training and coaching, and it becomes some kind of fuel for myself. So I suppose I write because I like to read. It's writing and reading are really two sides of the same coin, and in a sense, you're also writing because you want to share that little wisdom you have with people. Hopefully they'll find it useful. So every other day I get a mail from someone saying I read the book, found it very useful. That makes my day, So it's like you're trying to do something to help younger people. All my books are aimed at people who are probably in their 20s and their 30s, help them become better in what they do.
So let's dive into Sponge, Ambi. I read it with a lot of interest.
You need to dive into the ocean to get the sponge, right?
Exactly. So I did. And it's sort of drenching wet. So it's time to squeeze it out now. So, first of all, what I really liked was sort of the candor and the fact that they were not anonymous case studies. I guess these are clients where they have trust. And the fact that you take names actually makes it easier to digest and possibly, lends that credibility. But maybe to talk about a few themes that really caught my attention and piqued my curiosity. One of the pieces, you talk about flying without a net, and you refer to leaders willing to take risks and exposing themselves to a different point of view. I guess I've also spoken to a few investors, VC investors, a part of the podcast. And, this sort of balance between having conviction in your beliefs and being open to other ideas is a fine tightrope. And, sometimes people you find swaying too far on either end. So give us a sense of what's your insight here? What have you seen good leaders do in sort of keeping the conviction, but also leaving the door open for new opinions to shape their beliefs?
So this is Flying Without a Net, I think, is a name of a book written by Thomas DeLong, and I've quoted that in one of the chapters. So I think all leaders at some time or the other are really flying without a net. So you may fall thud, and then you may actually break every bone in your body, or you may actually end up, flying. So I think the big thing a leader has to do is to surround himself with a team who can help him take that call, right? you never have all the answers. So then, for example, in that story, when we went and recommended to GSK that they should position Cobalt X, CZS, which is a multivitamin with chromium, zinc, and selenium, purely for diabetic patients, no one had done that before. There were hundreds of antioxidants. This CZS is antioxidants, hundreds of antioxidants, and all the antioxidants are making all the claims. So it's good for diabetes, good for heart patients, it's good for skin, it's good for falling hair, it is good for peeling, everything. So we said, no, you should take it one single dimension. So, and at that stage, and I think it was bold of the marketing team, they said, look, we are scared. I don't know whether we can do this. But it was bold of them not to reject it. They said, look, let's take this to the MD. You present your story to the MD. And if the MD agrees, we'll go with it. A lot of time what happens is the people in the middle layer put in so many filters that they are so scared of taking any decision and they are always second guessing the boss. And by the time the boss gets to see it, what is shown is completely, mishmash of what was the original thought. So here I think two things happened. One, the team felt that yes, it was a risky strategy, but they were willing to take it to their boss and stand by it, saying, yeah, agencies recommended it. We think it's risky, but it's worth a shot. And the CEO at that time said, yeah, I agree. Let's go with it. Right. So obviously there was gut and brain. So there was analysis which showed that was a big market. But of course it was a gut feel reaction. So in marketing, we see that all the time. Most brand managers, brand teams want to hedge their bets. I want to appeal to young women. I want to appeal to middle-aged women. I want to appeal to young adults. I want to appeal to slightly middle-aged adults. Life can't go that way, right? So you have to take a chance and punt and hope and pray it works. If it doesn't work, good, you'll learn something.
But staying with that, is there something to be said about the leadership style of the CEO at that time for the team to feel comfortable letting you present the risky idea up there?
I think a lot can be said about the CEO and the team, right? One, the team was confident enough to take something like this to the CEO because they knew the CEO will not throw them out of the room. Okay, and the CEO was smart enough to say, hey, this looks interesting. And he encouraged the team to take such ideas to him. So I think it's both ways, right? I mean, both the CEO encourages the team to come up. So which is what we say, right? If you're the CEO, don't surround yourself with only people who are second guessing you. Ensure that you have people who disagree with you, who bring you ideas which you don't like.
Got it. The other piece that caught my attention was you speak about a chess-based competitive gaming tool, and you talk about using that with a few clients and that being a differentiator. But one specific example where you say you used that with Cadbury's and it opened up 1,000 crore opportunity. That really blew my mind. And I guess the question, Ambi, is whether it's advertising or coaching. I'm curious about the question, how do you price for value? Sometimes, strangely enough, pricing of some of these services, if I may use the term, is done upfront while the value is perceived later. So in your years of experience having done the work, what have some of the insights been in terms of what are the missed opportunities in pricing for value?
Pricing for value in advertising is actually very, very tough, right? I create a campaign and the campaign works for the client, and the client fires the agency and takes the same idea, goes to another agency. What happens to you? So I think the magic is in ensuring that if you've delivered something which really works for the client in advertising terms, you make sure you don't lose the client, because you front end invested all that time and effort in developing a breakthrough campaign, and then make sure you stay with that client for 10 or 15 or 20 or 25 years. So that's how you extract value. The client will not pay you 1% of his lifetime value on day one. Now, going to the chess thing, that's interesting because that chess was a tool which was developed by FCB globally, but FCB had abandoned that tool. So we kept it going under the Cogito consulting arm. And in that particular example, Cadbury called us to do this chess on leading competitors. And through chess, we unearthed the fact that there is a market developing at a particular end of the spectrum, which they had not addressed at all. And they woke up and Cadbury is a very smart company and they were not clients of ours at all. We didn't work with them. As an agency, we were not working with them. So my whole thing to Anand Kripalu was, look, you're a very smart company. We may not be able to deliver anything. This chess works, but we don't know. So he said, doesn't matter. At least this will open up our eyes. And it opened up their eyes. And they launched the whole range of Cadbury Silk, I think, as a brand. And when I met him a year ago, he said, yeah, that chess worked because that's a 1,000 crore business today. Now, did we get a share of 1,000 crores? No. But did they pay us a fair fee? Definitely, they paid us a fair fee. Okay. 2, they gave us multiple projects after that. And as luck would have it, when Oreo was coming into the country, Oreo being a global account of FCB, it came into the FCB, the interface folder, the second agency folder, and they were happy to work with them. So, I think that the fact that we did some good work on Cadbury, Karma, ended up.
It's less about the transaction, but more about the journey, I guess. Right?
It's about getting long-term value.
Right.
Getting long-term value. If you keep getting business from the same client, it's fine. Okay, So even in coaching or consulting, that's a thing, right? You do good work, the client should come back to you. Next month, next year, year after. And if that happens, then you are doing a good job. And you're pricing for value.
Got it. It's a fair insight. It's a fair framing of the situation. But again, if you take a 10-year view, have you learned what are your insights around what it takes to build and keep that relationship over a decade? If you reflect on journeys that have lasted decades or beyond, what is it about the nature of the relationship that you've built with those organizations or individuals?
I think, fortunately for us, the FCB Ulka group was not a very glitzy, glamorous agency. We were not into winning big awards, stuff like that. But one thing we were very good at was, if we get an account, we will not lose the account. So whether it was Tata Motors or Z or Wipro, ITC, of course Amul for many, many years, Abbott, ICICI Bank, these were all accounts which lasted, they're still there, 10, 20, 30 years. The idea is, once you get a client, make sure you do what is right for the brand, make sure to do your homework, make sure to speak your mind, and make sure, and I've written a chapter there called Smoke Signals, make sure to understand whether any smoke signals in your relationship. If there are smoke signals, you need to make sure you fix them. So one way of handling deep client relationship is that the relationship has to be at multiple levels. You cannot leave the relationship only to one person. It has to be at a CEO level, at a marketing head level, at a brand manager level. And therefore, if there are any murmurs which are happening. But the most important thing is, if you're sincere, you're doing good work, why will a client want to part with you? They will not.
The smoke signals also caught my attention. I was going to come to that anyway, but it's a good time to talk about it now. One is having relationships across multiple levels. Is there anything else that you've learned in terms of decoding the silence or decoding the sort of diminishing trust or engagement, as the case might be? What are the watchouts?
There's no one watch out because each client dynamic is different. But I think the big thing is, your biggest danger is if people change. Okay, at least in our agency, a lot of us were constant, and even one level below was constant. We don't change, right? But if there are changes in the client side, it means there is danger, right? So very often you need to figure out who's coming, what is his background, can you establish a relationship before he joins? One, you should have, you may have a relationship with him before, which is good. If it is not good, can you find out and figure out what relationship, whether you can build a relationship even before he comes. If it's a stable team, the other important thing which the agency, and I think every company should encourage, is tell the people who are front end running the account or running the client, give the bad news first. Good news can wait. So if you had a bad meeting, come and report it immediately. If you had a good meeting, you went and presented something, the client loved it, I'm happy to know that, but you can tell that to me on Monday.
There's nothing for you to do.
Yeah. But if you had a bad meeting, please come and share it immediately. And please remember, the fault is mine, the credit is yours. Right? So if there's any problem, if the client is very upset with you, I will go meet the client. So the other important thing which was inculcated was, if a client is upset, the senior will pick up the phone and talk to the client. You will not hide.
You will face the bullet.
Yeah, you will not hide. You will not blame the youngster for losing an account. So as a CEO, you may be responsible for 5-6 accounts. And at the next level, so who's the guy responsible for the account? He has to have the guts to tell the client, look, I heard you're upset with something we presented. Can I come and meet you? And in a lot of cases, what we find is the head of the business doesn't have the gumption to go meet the client. Whichever B2B business you're talking about, whether it is coaching, consulting, anywhere, headhunting,
profession,
you got to go to meet the client. So there's nothing better than, just meeting a client, having a face-to-face meeting, so.
That's very interesting. We were talking about Govind, my ex-boss at Egon Zender. One of the things he would always say is, if I tell him a search is not going well, the first question he would ask is the relationship at risk? Tell me if it's at risk, otherwise you deal with it. And it's an interesting insight, right? I think at some level you need to have the pulse on what matters.
True.
Lovely. Ambi, moving on to a different theme, I'm curious about the art of influencing. And I find the ad agency world is an interesting canvas, because you need to sometimes influence on fuzzy things, on emotions, on things which sometimes you may not be able to quantify. So what have you learnt about the art of influencing in all the years of the work you've done?
I think there's an interesting book, right, called Influencing Without Authority. Right? Unfortunately, I read it only last year. I should have read it 20 years ago. Because in advertising or any consulting space, you're actually influencing without authority. You don't have the authority to sign the budget off. You don't have the authority to sign off the copy. But, so I think you influence a client by first getting their trust. Okay. So I think trust is the basic. The client should trust you. Once the client trusts you, then don't take the trust for granted. Do your homework. Do enough due diligence. So the challenge is, do you know as much or more about the client's business than he does or she does? Can you do that? Right? So, there's a story I've written, in the book I've written about this story about UTI, mutual fund, where, Mr. Damodaran took over and I had strong biases against, PSUs, because they end up doing this L1 and, waste a lot of time. But the moment I met him, the first time I realized he was a different man. And then I met him the second time, we suddenly developed a great sense of mutual respect and trust. And it turned out to be a great relationship. He still continues to be a friend. So it's about 10 years, more than 10 years old. So I think the basic background is, how can you establish a sense of trust, of honestly sharing things. So it's not that, just because I've brought this campaign to me doesn't mean that if you reject the campaign, I'm going to shrivel up and die. Please reject the campaign. No problem. Okay. And we used to tell our creative guys, just hold it. Yeah, let's listen to the client. Let's not,
defensive.
And very often what happens is you let the client talk and you figure out that actually there is a way of saving this campaign, which you think is the right campaign for the client. Right. So trust. And last month I was in Bangalore and one of the book talks I was doing, one of my former clients was doing it for me. And he said this, look, this brand is so big, I probably think they deserve more credit than we do. Because they stuck by what was right for the brand. We often got confused. And I think that was real high praise, to come from a very large client.
Fascinating.
This is your host Deepak Jayaraman here. This segment reminds me of an insight from my last podcast conversation with Arun Maira, ex-member of the Planning Commission and ex-India chairman of BCG. He talks about how listening could be an effective way of giving tough feedback to people.
There's a very lovely saying that if a big tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear, was there a sound? So the listening is completed in the ear and the mind of the listener. Okay? So you have to prepare that ground to want to listen, to hear. So you're speaking very accurately with the best of intentions, that I mean in the best interest of this person. But that window there has not been opened. And there are many reasons that window may not be opened. One of them could be just in the relationship, that this person, it comes in a different world, from a different world. So I will discount whatever this person says. Though the person's saying it with the best of intention. It's my feeling of difference from this person. The second comes is what this person thinks there's something wrong with me and therefore is giving me advice. Then I'm putting on my defenses anyway. There's nothing wrong with me. How dare this person think so? So to get beyond these sort of barriers that we all put up for our own protection so that we are not kicked around, I just have to allow myself to listen to this person. When I'm listening to the person, those barriers inside the person are being dropped. The person dropping defenses. The person is enjoying listening to herself actually, because you're making the person talk. And a person is listening to herself when you ask the questions about what the person thinks. Because the person himself or herself may never have thought about why I think this way. They say, why I think this way. Now you're listening to your own mind.
I guess the key insight for me here is that if we listen without being defensive and ask the right questions to understand, we could get the other person to listen to themselves, and there could be a solution space that could emerge that could take the relationship forward. Just a quick request here. If you find this content purposeful, I would really appreciate if you take 2 minutes and leave a review on iTunes. It will help others discover this content. Now, let's get back to the conversation with Ambi Parameswaran.
Trust is an interesting theme indeed, Ambi. In one of the other chapters, you talk about Pradipta Mahapatra, an individual who I had the benefit of learning from in the context of the coaching certification at CFI. You describe a meeting with him where you don't discuss either advertising or business or marketing, but he decided to give you work at the end of the meeting. So maybe just double clicking on what it takes to build trust and maybe taking the cue from that particular meeting. What's been your experience wherever, if you really look at situations where you really have deep trusted relationships, is there a pattern around what it has taken to go there?
This chapter, where I've written about our late guru, Pradipta Mahapatra, and I've called it a pitch, which wasn't a pitch, I think. Right?
Correct.
So, a common friend introduced me to Pradipta Mahapatra. We were sitting in the hotel Kanimara, Taj Kanimara bar, And the friend left after 10 minutes and I was left to talk to Pradipta Mahapatra. And we spent 2 hours, I think we discussed about business, about economy, about various things. He never asked me what I will do for him as an agency. I don't think he even asked me for my specific credentials, anything of that sort. But at the end of 2 hours, he said, "Are you interested in working on our business?" And I said, "Of course, I'd love to." So he said, "Okay, come tomorrow morning and take the brief." So I asked him, "Look, don't you need to meet the team? Don't you?" He said, "No, I've met you. I've talked to you for 2 hours. I know what kind of guy you are. You'll work on my business, right?" So I said, "Yeah." So that's all I want to know. So I think Pradipta Mahapatra that's a lesson I learned from him, that in 2 hours, he could gauge me and figure out that I can trust this guy with my advertising business. Now, that's a great skill. I don't know whether I ever had that kind of a skill, but I realized that all relationships which you have with in advertising, you end up working with various kinds of people, photographers, filmmakers. You have to develop a sense of trust with the guy. So before you give him the business, it could be because of the show reel or whatever, but sit and have a 1 hour chat with him. That 1 hour chat will be more useful than any credentials he can give you, because you will understand a lot. You just let them talk, you listen, and you can figure out more. So I think this whole thing is we have to develop an ability to gauge a person whom we can then trust, right? There are two ways looking at it. Someone says, "Look, I trust someone and then I reevaluate." Some others say, "No, first I establish whether I can trust him and then I start trusting him." Both are, whichever works for you can work. Yeah.
But back to that meeting, I'm sure it's several years back, but anything to be said about how Pradipta spent those 2 hours with you? What if he wasn't talking advertising or business or marketing?
I really don't know what we talked about. We talked for 2 hours, right? But we were just chatting about where are you from, where did you do, what do you like to do, what do you read, all kinds of stuff. He never for once asked me, "How big is your office?" Actually, I had no one in my office. There's only me and my peon. Right? He never asked me. He didn't ask me, "Where is my office? How big is my office? Whether I have anyone in my office?" No. We talked about everything. Where are you from? Oh, you studied here? Okay, great. This, that, what do you like to do? How do you know so-and-so? How do you know so-and-so? We talked a lot about common friends,
Sure.
And he somehow at the end, he realized that I can trust this guy. Great,
And he was a unique man and a very fascinating storyteller as well.
Yeah.
I fondly remember him from the CFI days. The other piece that caught my attention in the book, Ambi, is the story you mentioned in your interactions with Dr. Varghese Kurien. I think that chapter is titled "Architects and Pillars," and I really liked the crux of the statement there, saying, an architect designs a home. You ask the guy to knock off a few pillars because you think aesthetically it doesn't look well. Later the house falls down. Whose fault is it? So I guess it just got me thinking on, as an advisor, where do you draw the line in terms of accountability? In a sense, this is my domain. You stay off because I'm the expert. And, and where do you let the client in? So I was just wondering, if what's been your experience around this theme of what is sacrosanct, where you don't let somebody change stuff because it's an expert's opinion, and where do you let yourself, to other people to shape stuff?
See, the Dr. Kurien story is part of our FC Bulka folklore. Though personally I've never worked on the business, but it's part of the folklore, and that company embodies this. Mm-hmm. They select you very, very carefully. Once they select you, they trust you, right? The contrast to this is what I've written about Mr. Rohinton.
Of the Max.
Yeah, for the Max. Now,
who was hands-on.
Yeah, he wrote the body copy of the 6 ad campaign, 800 words per thing. Now, on the one hand, so someone asked me the question, on the one hand, you're saying Dr. Kurien said, don't tell the client, don't tell the agency to change the color from blue to green. Tell the agency what is your point of view. Let them decide whether they want to change it from blue to green or red or orange or yellow. You think that's a great managerial or a leadership way of do. At the other time, you also praise Mr. Aga because he took that, he wrote body copy for an ad. Now, who was right? Should Aga have just told you, I don't like the body copy because it doesn't read well and you should let you to write?
It's a great insight. I never thought, I didn't somehow see them as different sides of the same spectrum, but they are.
Yeah, but they are. So I said, look, what Mr. Aga did was very interesting because he read the copy. He knew the stories were great. But he then said, look, let me give it a shot. He wrote what he thought was good copy, gave it to us and said, you want to use it, use it. Don't want to use it, don't use it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
He still left you the choice.
Yeah, exactly. This is my suggestion for copy. Right? It's up to you to then use it. So it was he was a client. He could have said, use my copy. He said, no, you people are the experts. See if this is okay. If it is not okay, whatever you write is fine. So I think that's also the sign of a humility of a leader. That, for example, going back to that old story, that architect comes to you and presents a house with 5 pillars and you are the house owner and you say, I don't like 5 pillars, let's make it only 2. And then tomorrow when the house collapses, whom will you blame? Will you blame the architect? Will you blame yourself? But if I were, let's say, Aga, I would have said, look, I don't know we should have 5. Maybe it's hurting the look of the place. I've drawn something with 3. Take a look. But you want to go back to 5, we'll go back to 5. And the agency would have said, yes, sir, let me look at what you've done with 3 pillars and let me take a view. And I may come back to you with a different one or maybe, this is fine. So I think it's a same problem handled very differently by 2 different people.
It's very interesting. And in both cases, I guess what's unsaid is that they still trust your judgment. It varies in the level of how hands-on they are.
Absolutely.
One is hands-off, one is hands-on, but the end point is they still trust your judgment, saying you're the expert, you take a call.
Yeah, exactly. So they are saying, look, you're the expert, you will take the final call, but this is our thought.
Our input into your process.
Our input into your process. You can reject it.
It reminds me of my days at Agon's, and sometimes clients would say, you're doing a search, you have these 5 candidates. I think this person might be a good fit. Why don't you throw him into your mix and evaluate independently? Rather than enforcing their view on the candidate on the search firm, they'd say, you take a call, you evaluate this person, but I think he could be a candidate.
Exactly. That's a better way to go. That way you're not... Whereas if they'd said, let's look at him, then why should you waste your time with the other 5 candidates? You want to look at him and take him, no?
Finish the process.
Yeah, let's finish the process.
Exactly. The other piece, Ambi, I was curious about was this notion of judgment. I guess I find advertising as an interesting canvas where you need to marry art and science, heart and head. What have you learned about leaders that have a very strong sense of judgment? If you really looked at some of the leaders that stand out in this particular domain, what about them gives them that sound sense of judgment?
I think some of the smarter marketing companies have a process of approval, right? But the smarter leaders don't let the process come in the way of accepting a good idea. They know that there is a process, we need to go through the process. But you people say that this will work. I think it will work. Let's go ahead. And let's use the process only as a process, right? So they are not slave to the process. Whereas certain companies, what I find, end up becoming a slave to the process. We like the idea, but let's put it into test. If test doesn't clear it, we'll not do it. No, I mean, if test pretest. If a pretest is 100% guaranteed risk thing, then why do you need us? You need a copywriter, you need a research agency. None of us are needed. Right? It can go straight into research. So and one had to do plain speaking to some clients, on this, because the process became a hurdle. But a lot of clients who are smarter are able to balance the head and the heart. Yes, you need a process, but you need to balance the heart. You think it will work? It will work. So, in one of the chapters, I've talked about how this particular client, I think Ravi Swaminathan of Compact, the whole process from the brief to the final ad coming on TV was 10 days.
You mentioned,
That's unimaginable. Anything less than 6 weeks is unimaginable. Normally it takes 3 months, and some large FMCG companies would take 6 months. 10 days. It turned out to be a damn good campaign. Probably because the client was clear this was the brief, and he was sharp focused on as long as the script delivered on the brief. He said, go. And I was doing the Delhi talk with him, and he said, look, in the IT space, in the technology space, we don't have time. We had a small innovation. We had got it, and we need to put it out there within a month, because someone else will copy it.
That's the window you have.
Yeah, that's the window I have. So you guys came with a good idea, and I said, let's go. And I only had a problem with the budget, and my colleagues said, no, we should spend the money because it's a good idea. We should not compromise on the production values. So we did it. The whole film happened in 10 days and turned out to be a damn good film, So he has a good balance of, head and heart.
This is your host Deepak Jayaraman here. Just a quick observation here. The point Ambi makes here reminds me of an earlier chat I had with the mythologist Devdutt Patnaik. I remember asking him how we should build good habits, and he spoke about the distinction between building habits and cultivating awareness.
This concept of habits is a Western idea. It comes habit is a bad word in Indian philosophy. It's a bad word. Therefore, you are continuously. Another word for habit is conditioned. I'm conditioned to do it. Conditioning, that's a Pavlovian response, right? A dog has a habit of salivating whenever the bell rings. And the West has made it a virtue. Action without thought is habit. Repetitive action without thought is habit. And if you look at many of the cultures in the West, they are like domesticated animals. At a particular time, they'll get up and run. At a particular time, they'll get up. So it's this kind of they are on a treadmill all the time. And this is seen as virtue. Driving in the car with a coffee in your hand. Nobody sees in America that this is tragedy. It's a tragedy. You can't enjoy your coffee. You can't enjoy your drive. You have glamorized slavery.
While this point was made in a different context, I guess the crux of the insight is that having habits are helpful, but being aware, understanding the nuanced context, and applying one's judgment is imperative. A bit like how Ambi says processes exist for a reason, but if you become a slave to the process, then you often end up with suboptimal outcomes. Now, let's get back to the conversation with Ambi Parameswaran.
But even in that, maybe sticking to that, right? Cost and value, especially in ad world, you also talk about superstars. We'll get to that in a minute. But, I think the cost could vary significantly. So how have you thought about cost and value when it comes to big spends? The same ad campaign, I'm sure, can be done at X, 10X, 0.1X. I guess the cost curve could vary significantly. So is that something that you've built a strong judgment on over time?
There are two different costs. One is cost of production. Right. The production is very fuzzy. I mean, globally it is very fuzzy. The same ad film, give it to one producer, he will quote 20 lakhs. Another producer will quote 2 crores. Now, are you getting 1.8 crores more from producer B compared to producer A? That's a judgmental call. A lot of clients get carried away by the star name of the director, etc., etc., etc. But one has to take a judgmental call, saying, look, this is okay, but this is not okay, right? I remember, I think, the Naukri story which I write about there, and And Sanjeev Bikhchandani told the detailed story in Delhi when we were doing the book launch. And he said, look, the film you presented was costing us 20 lakhs. We had only 2 crores to spend. That's 10%. It's a lot of money. I said, no, it's too much. Let's spend the money on media. Let's do the other option, which is a somewhat different script at a lower cost. But he said, one of the colleagues said, no, we should do this. And that's when I talk about this whole concept of failing versus failing to try. It's a demonstration that it is better to try and fail than not to try at all. So the media spends is pretty much, at least, those days was pretty scientific, right? What kind of exposures will you get? What will work? What is the threshold level? And then you keep titrating it. Nowadays with digital, it's become a lot more complex. And a lot of clients are just throwing money at digital and hoping something sticks. And everyone says, I want a viral video. You can't do a viral video. You can do a digital video and hope and pray it becomes viral.
Factors beyond control.
Yeah, totally beyond control. So, but you have clients who turn and say, I want a viral video. Hello, you can't do a viral video.
I tell people, right, it's like, I'm going to give you a dropped catch, a missed call.
Yeah.
You can only give me a catch. Whether I drop it or not it's not in your control.
Yeah, exactly. Except they get a missed call. You can cut off.
I know. But no, I think the related point about superstars, I was just curious, is every company as a leader, you sometimes have superstars who are rough around the edges, who are often high maintenance. I guess I'm sure you've seen this as a leader at FCB Ulka and in the clients you've worked with and in the stars that feature in your campaigns. What have you learned about harnessing the potential of these superstars? Sometimes you need to embrace them with their rough edges. What's your insight?
Well, we used to run with the philosophy that, we cannot afford to have superstars. You are a member of the team. The team is bigger than you. So if you're a superstar, there is no place in the agency for you because it's a teamwork. You don't start saying that it's my idea, my this. Having said that, obviously there were some people who were really much more talented, and what one realized over time is that these highly talented guys need to be fed challenging briefs all the time. And so we used to put them on specific accounts to work on, but they used to be the pinch hitting team. So you have a problem on any client, you give it to that guy and he will work on it. So keep them aligned to a business, but keep feeding them a lot of work.
They're like the commander unit.
Yeah. So you feed them a lot of work and they take on, and they say that in the agency system that work goes to the guy who can do it. It flows to him. And the so-called superstars have infinite appetite to do work. They never turn down work. So understand that and make sure that he doesn't throw a superstar tantrum, but he's doing the superstar work, and give him the recognition, give him the accolades. You don't need to give him double increment or all that, just a pat on his back. And if that is established as a custom, that's a custom. So, for example, the big thing in an agency is a big pitch. Who gets to be called to work on a big pitch? That's a sign of...
Big pitch as in a prestigious client, you mean?
Yeah, pitch for a new client. Right? So, it's a big pitch. Who gets called to work on that pitch? That's a sign of...
where you are in the pecking order.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Got it. Changing tack, Ambi, curious about storytelling as we think, as individuals, as leaders. Clearly, there's enough that's been written about the art of storytelling or the importance of storytelling. What have you learned as somebody who's been at the thick of storytelling? What have you learned about what does it take for an individual to be a good storyteller?
To be a good storyteller, you have to be a good listener to start with. You have to understand what works as a story, right?
In that context.
Yeah, in that context. And then figure out how you can weave a story into your narrative, right? And if you look at it in the book Sponge, what I've actually done is taken 25 stories of various clients whom I met, written them as stories, and then kind of segued that story into a managerial principle, a leadership concept, etc. So if I just started by saying leaders have to be humble, and then talked about Ardiaga, it wouldn't have worked. Whereas I flip it around. So here's a client from Pune who was going through a chain. He called us. We went and met him. And then this happened, that happened, and then this, and then that's an example of a leader who had humility. So today a lot of clients have these storytelling, invite specialists to do storytelling workshops. Now, I think storytelling is not something you can parachute into a team. I don't think that will work. I think you have to build a culture of sitting and telling stories, right? We were fortunate, a lot of, we worked with a boss called Anil Kapoor. Anil Kapoor can sit and talk for 10 hours. It'll be one story after another, story after another.
Pradipta was a great example.
Yeah, Pradipta, Anil and Pradipta are great examples of guys who can keep on telling you stories, right? So, are you building that culture of people sitting and actually shooting the air and telling stories about various things? And if you build that culture, then people pick it up. And storytelling is a great way of, engaging a client in what you're going to do. Instead of going and saying, I've got this campaign, but you start with the story, and then get on to sell what you're selling. The client knows you're telling a story, he's enjoying it. And he also knows that you're going to sell something, which is fine,
Which is why you're there in most of the situations, right? But the client knows that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's and I've heard, I've had clients who are great storytellers. It's a pleasure to, for example, meet Pradipta. Is always telling stories about something or the other, or Mr. Damodaran. You sit with him for an hour or two. He will tell you various stories about his days as an IAS officer in the Northeast to something else. So it's great fun sitting and listening. And in my own way, when my colleagues come and sit, you'll tell some story about something. And I'll tell them, I'm sorry, I might have told this before. They say, yeah, you heard this 3 times. Okay, theek hai. You heard this.
At least I'm consistent over time.
Yeah. The story ended the same way. It ended the same way. You told the client that you can't sack me, your father can't sack me, your grandfather can't sack me, only your grandfather. Have you heard that? Okay, good. You heard that now. Moral of the story, you understand. Okay, now jao.
Related theme, possibly more relevant in a gig economy context where a lot of people like myself in a way have taken the plunge away from the corporate ladder to do stuff on our own. The notion of a personal brand, right? I guess while we don't think explicitly about it, I guess at some level it's also critical to be thoughtful about it and deliberate about it. In what ways, what are some of the lessons from the world of brand building, brandbuilding.com, that can sort of benefit that let's say practitioners and solo advisors can benefit from? What are some of the principles that are helpful to bear in mind?
I think the basic principles of brand building will work, right? Which is who's your target customer? Who are you dealing with? What does your brand stand for? And are you true to your brand DNA in everything you do? And are you willing to invest in time, effort to build your brand? You're, for example, doing this through podcast. I'm doing this by writing books and writing columns, etc., etc. So people come and tell me, look, how do I become visible to the world? I said, the first thing is start writing and start posting it on LinkedIn and start, connecting it, tagging a lot of your friends. And you won't believe it. People they take months to write one article. I said, why does it take you so long to write a 500-word article here? You know so much. You're so knowledgeable. So if you don't take that effort to first define who is my target customer I want to deal with, what is my brand going to stand for, and what can I do to perpetuate my brand, you will be in the same place. The world will keep moving. And that's important. I mean, that's important for if you're a product brand, a service brand, or a personality brand. Like I'm sitting and doing this with you, right? So it will some way help you. It will some way help my brand. It will help your brand.
Sure.
So look for opportunities to collaborate. Look for opportunities to share.
Got it. Just a last question, then I wanted to sort of wrap up with a few summary questions. The other piece that really caught my attention in the book was your example of Nirma and Karsanbhai Patel, and the point about CEO connect with customer, right? I think you talk about a potential brand extension to a toothpaste, and
Yes.
it really got me thinking about CEOs of large organizations. What have you seen them do in not losing touch with the consumer, right? Sometimes when you're leading a large company, you can sort of get buried in the hierarchy. So that sort of got me thinking, again, if you take that as an example, or even from other experiences, what have you seen good leaders do to ensure that they have the pulse of the consumer that they're serving?
I think if you ask me, do they do the standard stuff to do market visits and meet customers and all? I think they do a lot of that stuff.
Right.
But more intrinsically, I think they feel for the customer. Inherently, they are conscious about who their customers are. They don't get carried away by all the hoopla around them. So going back to that Karsanbhai Patel and the Nirma story. Nirma was then ruling the roost, right? It was a number one detergent powder. The Nirma beauty soap was doing very well. And when they developed this product, Nirma toothpaste, they gave it to us. We did some research in rural India, rural Maharashtra, rural UP. And consumers quite liked the product. And so we went back and told Karsanbhai that, look, this Nirma brand as a toothpaste, people are willing to accept it because Nirma stands for good quality products. But he said, look, looking at the cost of raw materials today, I cannot launch it. So we asked why. He said, no, for a comparable pack size, if Colgate is 10 rupees, I cannot price Nirma more than 5 rupees. If I price it 5 rupees, I need to give my trade at least 2 rupees margin total between retailer and wholesaler. So I got to ship it out at 3 rupees. I can't do that. So we will not go ahead with the project. So and I said, why? He said, no, my consumer, for Nirma brand, they will want something of that value. They will not be able to pay more. And we respected this thing. Did he go and do any research? No. But intrinsically, instinctively, he knew that, this is what my consumer wants. This is what I stand for in my consumer's heart and mind. And he took that call. And I respected him for that. And
that instinct, maybe just to persist with that, Ambi, does it come because he's a consumer of the product, or he belongs to the demographic he's selling to? I'm sure he's grown beyond the demographic he's selling to. But do you have a sense of where that instinct comes from?
It's possibly because he came from that demographic. Okay, he came from that demographic, so he knows that mindset. While he may be, sitting in a palatial big office, his mind still is there. He still knows the consumer instinctively. A lot of us lose touch. We do both, right? There was another nice story in the book called Chai Wala Test.
Correct.
Where we flip it the other way. We think that our target customer is very crude. He will not understand this. He will not like this. And the Chai Wala Test story, when I say, look, Pradeep Guha just called the Chai Wala and asked him to choose among the 4 options which the agency presented. And the chaiwala picked the one which the marketing head of the company thought was too sophisticated for the lower income groups. So I said, look, you think it is too sophisticated lower income group? This boy is lower income group. Look at what he selected. So a lot of time we make that mistake also, saying, look, this is too sophisticated.
We think we understand.
We think we understand, it's too sophisticated. Let's dumb it down. A lot of advertising in India today, because of this problem, that a lot of it is aimed at the SCC, the middle of the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid. You dumb down stuff really badly. And then you realize that, consumer thinks our brand is cheap, our brand is bad, because you dumbed it down. The consumer didn't ask you to dumb it down. Given a choice, every consumer would like to, use fancy soaps and fancy, clothes and drive in fancy cars. They can't afford it, which is fine.
So lovely, Ambi. This has been fantastic. Maybe just a couple of questions to wrap up.
Yes, sir.
First is, I'm curious about how people make choices. So if you really look at your journey, what are the 2-3 choices you've made that have played a profound impact in your life that you would like to call out?
Talking about work, I think the choice I made to go into an MBA was a right call. Okay, because I would not have been a very happy doing, chemical engineering, thermodynamics, and designing reactors. Don't think that was. So that was, I think, a good call. And I think the second call that I came back into advertising, joining an agency called Ulka, which was shutting down, was a very good call. And I think I stayed the full 100 yards, turned out to be very good. And of course, I'm very fortunate that I have a family which is very, very supportive of all. I couldn't have achieved any of this without my wife, who's like a huge pillar of support. So I listen to, she reads all the books I write. She reads all the articles I write. And she's a bad, so to speak, critic. And I think she keeps me on level. And that's, you need to surround yourself with people who pull you down a few notches every other day, and she does her fair share of that, which I think is good. I'm grateful for that,
And the other piece I'm curious about is how people have grown at various points in their journey. If you really reflect on your, let's say, approach to self-development, if I may frame it that way, what are one or two things, if you had to be immodest about yourself, what are one or two things that you would like to call out in terms of how you've scaled up over time?
So you said be modest, so I will be modest. So I started teaching many years ago, and one of the directors of one of the Bombay Business School said I should do PhD, and I ended up doing PhD. It turned out to be an experience in itself.
When was this? At what stage was this?
I did my PhD in, 2005 or so, 2006, 2008 or 9 when I finished my PhD.
You must have been touching 50 or something.
Yeah, I was 50 plus.
Wow.
But I did it part-time PhD, but I was lucky. I got a decent guide, I got a decent topic. Bombay University PhD has its own complications. I managed to navigate all that, but turned out to be a good experience. Then just when I had turned an advisor to the company, I decided to go into a AMP at Harvard, 8 weeks. That was again a great experience, working, spending 8 weeks on campus with a really multicultural, multi-country group of 180 people. That's kept me going. And then when I was about to get out of my full-time job, I did my CFI certification, which was again very useful. So I think the fact that you tend to go back to class once in a while refreshes you every time, so I've been lucky.
Lovely. And in summary, Ambi, this podcast is titled Play to Potential. At some level, it's about people being coherent about the two questions, where to go and how to grow at various points in time. So in summary, what's your takeaway to the listeners of this podcast on for them to play to their potential?
So to play to your potential, become a sponge. is my plug for my book as well, because you will meet a lot of smart people on your journey. Learn to learn from every one of them. See every interaction not as a selling interaction or a buying interaction, as a learning interaction. And as you keep learning, as you go along, you will become better and you will definitely play to potential.
Lovely. Pleasure, Ambi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed this chat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, and all the very best to all the listeners.
Thank you.
I hope you found the conversation purposeful. There were 3 big takeaways for me here. First was the point Ambi makes about trying a few things, but by 35, making a commitment to a direction and then motoring ahead with conviction. While we live in turbulent times with evolving career paths, I do think the fundamental principle still holds. You go broad, try a few things, and keep reflecting on what's giving you energy while also seeing where you're distinctive. And at some point make a commitment maybe for a 5 to 7 year period in a certain direction and see where that takes you, and then repeat that algorithm again. The only thing that might have changed is that you might have to run this algorithm a few times in one's life, but the notion of going broad and then going narrow is valid advice, I feel. One of my earlier guests, Chandramouli Venkatesan, the author of the book Catalyst, talks about the notion of learning loops when it comes to career moves. You might find that concept interesting if you want to know more. The second insight that stayed with me was the point Ambi makes about how good clients lean on the judgment of the expert and ensure that they derive that value. Being hands-on or delegating the work is one thing, but not leveraging the wisdom of the expert that's working with you is often a lost opportunity. The third insight that stayed with me was the point Ambi makes about storytelling not being a skill, but being a core element of the culture that needs to be carefully cultivated over a period of time. You can't just inject storytelling into an individual with a 4-hour workshop. You really need to role model it for your team to start exhibiting those behaviors. I look forward to having you at one of the subsequent conversations of the Play to Potential podcast. Signing off, this is Deepak Jayaraman here. To know more about the advisory work I do, please visit transitioninsight.com. Bye now.